This lesson could be called Hell Bound. So that doesn't sound very good. But yeah, the Revelation 20 talks about the millennium. And but there's two big important events at the very beginning of the millennium and at the very end. Both of them have to do with going into the lake of fire. And I like to say, wherever your master goes, you will go. There's only two places. People think, oh, I'm neutral, I don't believe in God or the devil. But it doesn't matter, because they're going where their master is. If they say, I don't believe in God or Christ or religion, whatever their terminology is, it just means they're following the devil, because Paul says in 2 Timothy 2:26 that they're taken captive by the devil at his will. Anytime he wants to use them or take them over, he can do it. First of all, because they don't know what's happening. So they're like, it's like those sci-fi movies, right? Where the Night of Living Dead or whatever, they implant something in your brain and you become a zombie for the aliens. It's like that. Everybody that's not a Christian is a zombie for Satan. They just don't understand it. But let's see what the word says. And then I saw an angel coming down from heaven with the key to the abyss. They made a good movie about that. It's called The Abyss, but that was talking about like the big trench in the ocean going down. But that's a common word from the Greek. It's kind of like, another way to put it is bottomless pit. Although it may have a bottom, we can't find it, so it's a bottomless pit. Holding in his hand a great chain. Okay, so that has to be a pretty good chain to chain the devil, right? I mean, he supposedly is the most powerful angel, or was. I don't know if he's most powerful. I guess Michael is, but I don't know if they had a wrestling contest or not. But I'm sure all the archangels are the most powerful because they were the leaders. So, but he's going to go down to Tartarus, and Tartarus is the way it's described is it resides at the bottom of the abyss. So we're going to see a chart a little bit later. But the thing to glean about this is Satan is out on bail. I guess that's the right word, right? Somebody's in the court and they get convicted. At the cross, he was convicted. When Jesus arose, the devil was convicted, and he's out on a long chain as it is. So to us, it seems like a couple thousand years is a very long time. But Aunts reminded me that the Bible says that a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord. So Satan is been tried. He's found guilty, but he's not yet incarcerated. So, but he's going to be, and we're going to read about that. So at the end of the tribulation, he is going to be put in chains and captured and reside at the bottom of the bottomless pit. It's kind of an oxymoron, the bottom of the bottomless pit. How can there be a bottom anyway? But that's how we'll think about it. He sees the dragon, that's the angel, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan. Well, in case we're not sure who this guy is, God is explaining who he is in no uncertain terms, and bound him for 1,000 years. So right there, even if we don't understand all the chronology and time frame, we understand there's a tribulation for 7 years, and then there's going to be the millennium. So if he's bound for 1,000 years, is that happening in the beginning, the middle, or the end of the millennium? It has to be the beginning, right? Because the millennium is 1,000 years, and he's bound during the entire time. The millennium is 1,000 years, and he threw him into the abyss and shut it and sealed it over him. So I think the idea there is he's not escaping, so that he could not deceive the nations until the 1,000 years were complete. We're going to find out he's released. After that, he's going to be released for a short time at the end of the 1,000 years. So he's bound down there in Tartarus, and he is going to be loosed at the end. And you say, well, that's crazy. Why would God release the devil? And I've heard it explained. I guess it makes sense to me because of God's infinite timeline, that this is to prove to people that the evil they do is not just because of the devil. You say, well, that doesn't make sense either. Well, there was an old comedian, Flip Wilson. He used to have this comedy routine. Whatever happened, he said, the devil made me do it. And a lot of people think like that. Yeah, well, I'm not really bad, but the devil made me do this or that. God's going to put them in chains for 1,000 years. During the millennium, there's no devil causing anything, and therefore people have no excuse. And you say, well, I thought they lived forever and during the millennium. No, these are mortal people that managed to make it through the tribulation. How many? It's hard to say. And they are going into the millennial kingdom as mortals. And because God is going to have a population of citizens in the millennium, and those people will have children. And I've heard somebody say, rightfully so, God has no grandchildren. In other words, your children aren't just automatically believers because you're a believer. They have to make a decision for God. That would violate God's sovereignty, and also would violate the fact that each person is responsible for their own salvation. Okay, the scripture teaches everyone is responsible for their own salvation. But if your mother and father made you automatically a Christian, then you're not, then the child is not responsible. So that can't be a true position. So, but we're going to have a multitude. If you remember before the flood, and that was at least 1,000 and probably longer number of years, the earth was greatly increased and populated. Remember, he told them to go and populate the earth. And the earth, it's hard to say how many people it had, but it may have had as many people as we have now. There's no way of knowing for sure. But I mean, if you use just Malthusian population growth, in other words, it's like doubling, right? You have the first pair, and then they have 4, and then they have 16. Things just go on like that. Well, at the end of 1,000 years, you're going to have millions upon millions upon millions of people, and those are all going to be mortal people, the children of those tribulation believers. And the Bible says that a child will die at 100 years old. So these people are not immortal; they can die. Probably is going to be rare, but when they die, they will die. I mean, today, if the child dies 6, 7, it's a horrible tragedy. But at that time they're going to say, "Oh, he was only 100." It's going to be like, because they're going to live the same type of lifetime that we read in the Old Testament Genesis. Methuselah was 969 years old, and some of these people, very possibly, are going to live that long also. It doesn't say specifically, but the whole idea is a perfect environment ruled by God. It's going to be very much like the Garden of Eden in that sense. And he threw the devil and he sealed them, and he's going to be sealed until the final battle of Gog and Magog, not to be confused with the Ezekiel battle. Remember, Ezekiel 38 and 39 is when Russia and 5 Arab nations, Muslim nations, come down against Israel, and they're destroyed, and it's at the very beginning of the tribulation. Similar verbiage here, Gog and Magog, but it's referring to a totally different concept. And maybe some of their descendants ultimately are part of this. But however one interprets this, at the very end, there's going to be a tremendous rebellion. But it's not like a world war or anything. Much like Armageddon, we see that remember at Armageddon, Christ comes back with them, and out of his mouth is a 2-edged sword, and he slays all the millions of opposing army and Air Force, whatever, soldiers. But in this case, he's going to be released to stir up trouble on the earth. And that is going to be another proof. In other words, the devil has been the one stirring up troubles throughout history, right? The only time in history, in 7,000 years of recorded history. Oh, by the way, there is civilization, even by the atheist, began 5,000 years ago. What does the Bible say when it began? Roughly 5,000 years ago. Okay, so it's like, sometimes they don't know what they're saying. They think we're here millions and millions. I watched something on YouTube. Yeah, 100 million years ago, the ape, and they go through all this timeline, and all this time, there's no civilization. And mysteriously, 5,000 years ago, poof, civilization came about. Well, the Bible tells us what really happened there. Atheists and unbelievers, there's no end to the nonsense they'll cook up to get you to try to believe the lie of the devil. And they got a lot of people hoodwinked. But at any rate, to further explain this, where the devil is going to be, I made up this chart last semester. Quickly going over all of it. God is in the third heaven. Paul said, I knew a man, whether dead or alive, and he went to the third heaven. Third heaven is where God resides. And then there is the second heaven, Carl Sagan's heaven. He had a program back in the late 70s called The Cosmos. And he was an astronomer, an atheist. And but at any rate, so everything that we see in the universe, the Hubble telescope, and the new James Webb telescope, and everything, no matter how far they look out there, all they're seeing is cosmos. They will never find the third heaven, because the third heaven is not in this universe. You can get in the best spaceship you can imagine and go as long and forever. You will never get to where God is, because God doesn't fully exist only in this universe. Heaven is in a different dimension, is the best way I can. Scientists are beginning to catch up. They now postulate 11 dimensions. So we have length, width, height, and time is the fourth dimension. Einstein dealt with all that. But now with the Great Hadron Collider in CERN, they have found out through the collision of the atoms and minutely examining it all that there's 11 dimensions they can prove. We can't see it. It's all, in scientists' heads. But the idea is that there's many, many dimensions out there that we can't see, and humans will never see unless God opens our eyes. Remember that story where I think it was it Elijah or Elisha, and his servant said, oh, woe is us. And he said, open your eyes. We're surrounded by a great multitude, an army. And then suddenly the servant saw the chariots of God and the angels. So if God doesn't open your eyes, you're not going to see the spiritual dimension. It's just, it's not going to happen, because it's not an earthly dimension. That's why Christ came down. He's the only one actually that, can, as far as I can tell, go freely between heaven and the earth, because he's God, right? So he walked through a wall. Well, so he was in heaven, and then he walked through a wall, and he's in the room. Now, how does that happen if heaven's, 3 zillion miles out there in the cosmos? It doesn't. That's you don't understand the concept. He went from a higher dimension into a lower. The higher can go lower, but the lower cannot go higher. So we cannot just, poof ourselves into heaven, but people in heaven and the angels can come down to us, because the higher can go lower. Earthly material things, this is a low form of reality. The unbelievers go, oh, this is the reality. I believe in reality. But what they believe in is a very low form of reality. They don't understand the real reality, the higher reality beyond the three-dimensional and time reality. So, but that's what the scriptures teach us. Scriptures are always ahead of science. Science is always trying to catch up with God, because God made it all. All scientists are doing is looking at what God made and trying to figure out what it does and what it is and how he made it. But they can't make anything. They don't make anything, as far as ultimate realities. They can't do that, because we're men, we're finite. Finite can never make infinite. It's impossible by the nature of the definition. But at any rate, so what we have here is the Earth's atmosphere, which we would call, the oxygen, nitrogen, the air around the Earth. That is the first heaven. So just from the Greek perspective here of the way it's described in what we know from the scripture God has revealed, we know the Earth's atmosphere. If you don't know anything else, you got air around you, right? So we see the birds up there. That's first heaven. And then at night, on a good clear night, we'll see a zillion stars. That's the second heaven. That's the cosmos. In the third heaven, you will never see with your natural eyes because it's in a totally different dimension. I don't know which one. I guess all of them. I think God's in all dimensions. So he's equally in this one. He created it and he's fully in it and is in control. But he's way bigger. Like trying to understand God without him revealing himself is like an ant trying to understand me just as I'm about to step on him. It's like we cannot, only if God takes us like he did John and take you up there and shows you what's happening, can you even begin? And even then it's a glimpse. You can't fully understand it because the finite can't understand the infinite. And that's why Paul says, when on that day, the rapture, he says, we shall know as we are known. We shall see him face to face, not through an obscure glass. So that's why, because he has to take us up. We cannot go up by ourselves. Otherwise, I'll just say, let's get out of here, everybody. Let's all rapture. Everybody ready for a rapture? Let's go. And you say, no, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. Correct. You got an A on that test. You do not know how to do that. But anyway, so everybody lives forever. That's something that people don't understand. And of course, if you watch movies and TV, which so much of our ideas come from today, it's a matter of whether it's a ghost show or whatever it is. People have such screwy ideas about what is out there and where are they going when they die. And the truth is that everyone will live forever. I recently read that, in fact, the guy who founded my company, Oracle, and Elon Musk, and a number of these, what's that guy in Facebook? Zuckerberg, and all the rest of them, they're putting millions upon millions of dollars into immortality. I'm not making this up. You can Google anything. I'm just Googling and reading what's out there if you don't see it on YouTube or TV. They want to live forever because they believe that when they die, that's all there is. So if you just think you're an animal descended from a monkey, you're just an evolved monkey. Hans, did you realize that you're a monkey? You need help to believe that. I mean, you need a lot of help. The devil has to really give you a lot of help to believe a lie like that you're a monkey. But at any rate, so basically, God made us. He made us the way we are, and we are unique in every way. And don't believe our chromosomes are probably 90-some% the same as a worm. That has nothing to do with it. That's computer code. DNA is computer code. I deal with computer code. You could take a piece of computer code and write one new line and make a totally different outcome to that code. So it doesn't matter if you use the same code was for a different project. You can take it, put a few sections or a new line, a few new lines in there, and it's going to do a totally different thing. It doesn't even look like the other thing. And that's what God did. Yes, we're all similar because we're made by the same creator, same designer, like the same artist. Go to an art, when you look at an artist's work, there's a signature, there's something similar in all of them. Okay, so everything in life that's in this planet, it has the same signature, the same DNA overall signature, but we are unique. But at any rate, so everybody, my point is we're infinite. We're not monkeys. We are infinite beings, and everyone, whether they're angels in heaven or on the earth, whether they're people who don't believe or believers, they all live forever. All will live forever. Everyone is finite. I mean, infinite. We're not finite. Our bodies are finite, but our spirits, which you can't see, that are at a different dimension, higher dimension. In that sense, we are of a higher dimension. Our spirits will continue on forever. And you have to realize that all these fools are trying to live forever when they're going to live forever anyway. The question is, you're going to go where your master goes. Where's your master going? Who is your master? There's only two masters. A fool thinks it's him. A fool thinks he's the master. He is no master. He can't even get out of bed in the morning. That's his God. His God is so pitiful. A little virus could keep him down for weeks, right? That's his God. I don't want his God. I'm sorry. And the real God, there's only two powers, but only one is the real God. Satan is a created being. As powerful as he is not God. He wants to be God. He rebelled, but he is not God. He's a created, finite being. He will live forever like we will live forever. But he is not God. In fact, this whole chapter, the whole purpose of this chapter is showing who he is and what he is and where he's going. So we saw in the past that torments is where the Old Testament people went awaiting their trial. Abraham's bosom is where the Old Testament saints that believed went. And when Christ arose, he emptied that. He took captivity captive. The abyss is that gulf fixed between. Remember the rich man and Lazarus? He said, I can see the guy over there, and the guy's talking to him, but there's a great gulf fixed between us. That's the abyss here in the middle. And at the bottom of the bottomless pit is Tartarus, and Tartarus is where the fallen angels who rebelled in Eden and cause mankind to what should we have intercourse with the women in such a way that they made beings who were monsters. We call them chimeras. Yeah, okay. That's a modern term. I just read about it yesterday.
Where is the word hell comes?
This is all hell. Okay, that's okay. Hades. In the Old Testament it says Sheol. In the New Testament the word is Hades, or Hades. And so basically, all of these compartments down here in the King James are translated as hell, but they're really not the same by any stretch. So if we're talking about torments, it was descriptive. Something, they're in torment, or Abraham's bosom. They've gone to be with Father Abraham. But everything within the big circle down at the bottom here is hell. That's all the compartments of hell. Except for Gehenna, the lake of fire is not described as being with the rest. There is no particular locus. There's no location for Gehenna. And Gehenna is going to be the everlasting abode of the devil and those who follow him. To come full circle with my thought, if you follow the devil, then forever you're going where the devil is going. If you follow Christ, then forever you're going to be where Christ is. So choose ye this day whom you will serve. You're either going to spend eternity in the lake of fire, Gehenna, or you're going to spend eternity with Christ in the millennium, and then in the new heavens, new earth, and new Jerusalem. That's next week. Next week, don't spoil it. He's giving it away, folks.
Somebody said it's going to be renewed.
Yeah, you're ahead of me. You're ahead of me. Okay, we're on chapter 20 now. You're dealing with 21. Okay, but anyway, so let's see if we can make some progress. Revelation 24-5. Then I saw the thrones who were seated on them and had been given authority to judge. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony. Now, where is the beheading occurring? Does anybody remember anything during the tribulation where there's something like a beheading occurring? Right, so right in the middle of the tribulation, when Satan inhabits the Antichrist, and he becomes, I believe it's a clone, but however you want to believe it, he's going to proclaim himself God in the temple, newly rebuilt temple, and then he's going to say, take the mark or die. And apparently the way they're going to kill the believers when they catch them is beheading them. Only in last couple of years that people believe that's Islam. That was never the case throughout at least 1,500 years plus of interpretation. Nobody believed this was Islam. Islam's a Johnny come lately, first of all. Muhammad didn't come along until 636. So for 600 years, the church never believed anything like that. And what they did believe are the reference that would have been made in the 1800s and through the 1900s is something that happened in France, and it was well known. After the American Revolution, the French had their own revolution, and that's where beheading started. The beheading was done with a guillotine. Dr. Guillotine came up with what he thought was a humane method of execution, and that was the guillotine. So I'm not saying it's a guillotine. I'm just saying if somebody tells you that's Islam is going to rule and cut people's heads off, I find no evidence for that in the scripture. And also, as I've gone over before, the first event of the tribulation is Ezekiel 38, where the Islamic nations of the north attack Israel, and they're all destroyed. So Islam is basically crippled at the beginning of the tribulation. Islam is not going to be the ruler by any stretch. But at any rate, keep it on going. The rest of the dead, I want to say the tribulation believers receive their immortal bodies, right? So the ones who are beheaded, they're in heaven, their spirits are in heaven, soul and spirit, and they're going to inherit their immortal bodies just like we did in the rapture. And then the rest of the dead do not come back to life till 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. So there are a number of resurrections. The Old Testament saints were resurrected when Jesus came out of the grave, right? He took captivity captive. He emptied Abraham's bosom. And then we have all the Christians, dead or alive. 1 Corinthians 15 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 talks about the fact that the immortal must change into immortal, because the flesh, they cannot inherit the kingdom. So we're all going to be changed. That's the second resurrection, is the church. And the third resurrection will be the tribulation believers, since they are going to have their immortal bodies. So in the millennium, we're going to be moving along with, ruling and reigning with Old Testament saints, New Testament saints, us. You're going to get to meet Paul and Peter and the rest of the guys, and we're just going to be, man, can you imagine that, talking to Paul about the real thing? He said, yeah, I forgot to write this. Here, let me tell you about something else happened. We're going to, what did I think John said at the end of his gospel, if all the things were written down that Christ did, there would not be enough books to contain them. Well, we're going to get to talk to John directly and find out all this stuff. So, I'm going to be bored in heaven. Now, I think at least for the first 1,000 years, I'm going to be learning stuff from Peter and Paul and John and the rest of them. Jesus, man. But at any rate, here we go. We see that the rest of the dead did not come to life until 1,000 years were completed. And so the rest of the dead are the unrighteous believers. And they're going to go to the great white throne judgment, WTJ. Everybody is going to go before the judgment, except they are going to be judged by their works. Okay? God has a movie of everything in your life. And there's two kinds of people. The first kind of people will go, I'm no worse than anybody else. I'm a pretty good Joe. And then he's going to go up before the great white throne judgment. And God's going to go, let me play you the movie of Jesus's life. Now I'm going to play the movie of your life. And if you're not as good as Jesus, you're not getting in. That's the standard. You got to, and if you want to rely upon your own works, your own goodness, then you're going to have your move. There's an old TV show called This Is Your Life. They'd bring people on, and they would have, people come and tell about their lives and all this. Well, we're going to have all the unbelievers are going to have a This Is Your Life moment. And not a one will measure up to Christ. That's the standard. If you're relying upon your own goodness, you're no worse than anybody else, then Jesus is the standard, and you will fail. However, we are not going to be judged by that. We are in the book of life. Everybody is written in the book of life. And if your name is not blotted out, God's an optimist. No matter who you are, every single person is written in the book of life. And he said to his disciples, pray that you are not blotted out of the book of life. That's what you're shooting for. So how do you get not blotted out? Well, it's like you're going to the country club, right? Really ritzy country club you can't afford. And you go in there and you go to the guy at the desk, yes, sir. Show us, who are you? Are you anybody? and then you're going to say, no, I'm nobody, but I know this guy. I'm with this guy. And they go, who's this guy? Oh, his name is Yeshua. Oh, you're with Yeshua. Come on in. Come on in. You don't have to have your name. Your name is written in the reservation book of golf. You're going to be in there, not because you're relying upon your good works, just the opposite, because you know that your works stink. They're filthy rags, and that you have to rely upon Jesus. And if you're with Jesus, you get to go anywhere you want to go. You're with him. You're with the boss. I got news for you. Who's the guy who says his nickname is the boss? Bruce Springsteen. He's not the boss by any stretch. He's going to be in the lake of fire from everything I can see. I'm not the judge, but I'm just saying, yeah, he's going to be with his boss. So I mean, he writes good songs and all that, but hey. Any rate, the second death is the eternal judgment. So all these people that go before the great white throne judgments are judged by who they are and what they've done. They're going to be with their master. They have a master. We're not going, since we're with him. Hey, who are you with? I'm with Jesus, It's just the opposite of the crowd when they took him before Pilate, and everybody said, give us Barabbas. We won't have this man rule over us. We're going to say, we don't want Barabbas. We're with him. We're with Jesus. And that is it. There was no neutrality in that crowd that day. There's only two crowds. It's a famous sermon. You either want Barabbas, which is your own self way, your own self-willed way, and your own goodness, or you want God, Jesus. There's no neutral. People think there's neutral. Jesus said, if you're not for me, you are against me. Where's the neutrality in that? You can't sit on the fence. But at any rate, this is not a evangelistic sermon here. Okay. What we have is the devil being cast into the lake of fire. You see the little graphic, all the people in the lake of fire. I don't think they're going to have so much fun in there. When 1,000 years are complete, Satan will be released from his prison. So he's down there 1,000 years and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, meaning north, south, east, and west. And Gog and Magog to assemble them for battle. The numbers like the sand of the seashore. And that's what I was saying earlier. In other words, this is at the very end of the 1,000 years. And Gog and Magog is just the term used for the assembled rebellious ones. And they are going to be so many, you can't number them. After 1,000 years of generation, and multiplication of geometric multiplication, there's going to be millions, probably billions of people. And but the mortal believers multiply, and their progeny have free will to receive or reject Christ's reign. This is what I said earlier. And they marched across the broad expanse of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints, that beloved city. It's going to be Jerusalem, obviously, where Christ is. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. This is just like Armageddon. It's like, hey, we're going to go. Is God telling me something? Oh my gosh, they're controlling the lights against me now. Oh man. Okay. Anyway, so it's going to be a very short battle. It's never going to be a war. The battle's never going to really get on, because God's going to go, oh, you guys want to fight? Boom. Where'd they go? They're gone. Okay. The devil goes to Gehenna, and all the people that follow him are going to go to Gehenna. And then we're going to have the great white throne judgment. And the great white throne judgment is where everyone who's ever died will go before God. As I explained, the saints are exempt because we're with Jesus. You are either with him or you are your own savior and judged that way, even if they're cremated. Oh, this is interesting. Some people say should you cremate, or I'm not saying you should do it or not do it. That's not the point. The point is that the sea will give up the dead in them. Well, these people never had a burial. The shipwreck, they floated to the bottom and they decayed and their bones are left, and they had no funeral. They weren't embalmed. They weren't even cremated, but it says that they are going to be resurrected. Well, by inference, that means it really doesn't matter what state you're in, because your resurrection is not dependent upon your bones. It's not dependent upon where you are in the ground or whatever, because the resurrection is a spiritual occurrence. And God has your perfect body in his being. I mean, he knows who you are, and he's going to resurrect it no matter what state you're in. That's the inference here. If anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life, then he was thrown to the lake of fire with his master. So we see that those who conquer are mentioned in Revelation 3.5. We conquer by the word and the blood. And remember that Jesus said in Luke 10:20, if your name is written in the book of life, be joyful. Remember, the disciples came back and they were casting out demons. Said, man, this is great. We love these demons, this demon casting out. And he said, that's not important. He said, that's not the real emphasis. Be glad you're written in the book of life, because that means you're going to heaven. Well, next week, we're going to have the three news. This is Aunt's favorite. New heaven, new earth, and new Jerusalem. So chapter 21, we get a lot of new.